DevilNeverCry.
What is up everyone, it is me DevilNeverCry, and as the title of the video suggests, I was once more invited down to Square Enix headquarters by some very kind folks to be one of the first to be able to play and experience Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the second part of the trilogy of the FF7 remake project. The footage you'll be seeing in the background today is the footage that I was allowed to capture alongside footage from Square Enix themselves. I played two separate demos that showed off two distinct areas of Rebirth, and in this video I'll be discussing in detail everything that I was able to experience, diving deep into some of the game's new mechanics, and overall just providing my thoughts on how the game is shaping up to be ahead of its February release. For quick context, I have played the original Final Fantasy VII as well as both the remake and Intergrade, so whilst diving into Rebirth, I somewhat knew what to expect, and at the very same time I really didn't, and I think that most of you who have had the same experience I have playing both the remake and the original can probably share in that same sentiment. So to kick things off, the first demo was titled the Fated Mount Nibel mission, in which Cloud and Sephiroth are tasked with investigating a malfunction at a Mako reactor in Mount Nibel. This flashback scenario also happens to feature a young Tifa and a quiet Shinra grunt who accompanies the duo, but of course are not featured in any of the combat. If you've played the original Final Fantasy VII, you'll probably remember this scenario quite well. It seems as though this may serve as the game's opening or intro. As I was playing, the game was throwing up a fair amount of tutorial prompts to seemingly help the player get acquainted with basic things like traversal or combat. Unsurprisingly, of course, FF7 Rebirth plays much like a remake. Traversal works largely the same, with the player being able to explore the mapped area at will, with chests and materia being the reward for going slightly off the beaten path. The game features some form of interactivity with the environment, as you're often forced to do things like climb ledges or ladders using the terrain action button, which will circle to progress onwards. Though Cloud will automatically do these things of course when sprinting, but ultimately the differences really start to become apparent when players enter combat. Rebirth reintroduces and expands upon the synergy system that debuted in the intermission DLC for Remake. Players now have access to a new suite of synergy skill shortcut commands that appear by pressing and holding the R1 button. Doing so will bring up a new list of skills that you can use in battle. Which ones you can access of course are effectively dependent on who you have in your current party. Using a synergy skill does not consume a portion of your ATB gauge, unlike items or abilities. Compounding on this though is also the synergy ability system, and there is a difference. This gets introduced later on in this first demo during the boss fight right at the very end, where after a certain point, party members will also have a synergy bar or gauge that fills up slowly as the active player uses up their ATB gauge during combat, doing things like using abilities, items, or magic. When the specific members needed for a specific synergy ability have enough synergy stocked up, they can then use that special ability via the command menu. These abilities not only hit hard, but often come with special buffs, such as infinite MP for a limited amount of time, or even extended stagger time. Once a synergy ability is used, however, stock is taken from that bar of all the members involved, meaning that you'll have to build it up once again by spending ATB as multiple characters. I think essentially it's been designed this way specifically to entice and reward players for swapping and directing team members in battle constantly and effectively. Overall, I really enjoyed the added layer of depth that the synergy system added to the combat. Moving on though, we kinda have to talk about the elephant in the room. That is of course Sephiroth. Sephiroth is indeed playable for this portion of the game, whereas in the original he was just an AI-controlled member of the party. Still though, he is just as fearsome as he was in the original, as he pretty much decimates anything he comes across. He hits harder and faster than Cloud does, and just oozes style while he does it. He actually features a unique mechanic in that normal melee attacks will fill up this very specific bar, with it essentially providing different combo enders by pressing the triangle button based on how full this bar is. However, if you take any damage, that bar will essentially drop back down to 0. Think of it almost kind of like Virgil's motivation system from the DMC games, where the cooler you are, basically the less damage you take, the more cool things you can do. When controlling Sephiroth, you can choose to also press and hold the square or attack button to charge up a ranged attack, essentially making him a menace at all ranges. Holding the R1 button, the synergy button, also puts him in what's known as the retaliation stance, where by timing a press of the attack button, he can actually parry an incoming enemy attack and retort with his own. And yes, Sephiroth can use that move in combat as an ability, and if you know, you know. Cloud, on the other hand, largely plays exactly the same as he was in Remake, with both his Operator and Punisher modes returning. Precision Guard also makes a return, where Cloud is able to parry an enemy's attack by guarding in Punisher mode at the last second. I even managed to find a materia that extended this parry window, which I guess is a plus for those who might struggle with tight timing. One interesting change, however, that I wasn't expecting at all was a mid-air shortcut menu. You're now actually able to set shortcuts separately that you can call upon in mid-air, and these can be different to the shortcuts that you set for the ground. There seems to be a little bit more flexibility with mid-air attacks in Rebirth, as abilities that could only be used on the ground in Remake can be used in mid-air here. As we pressed on toward our goal here at Mount Nibel, I continued to come across obstacles such as a zoo as a mini-boss, or even an elevator that wouldn't open due to increased atmospheric Marco readings that forced me to use a giant vacuum cleaner to scoop things up and open up the elevator. Eventually though, this first demo culminated in a fight against the Materia Guardian, or the Materia Keeper as he was known as in Final Fantasy VII. This fight largely wasn't too hard, mostly in thanks to both Cloud and Sephiroth being capable party members. There were times where Cloud would get bound up by a boss's attack, specifically a grab attack, that then forced you to take control of Sephiroth to weaken his grasp and let Cloud free. The boss fights in Rebirth still follow that standard pressure stagger system that they did in Remake, but thankfully our party hit hard regardless of whether or not the boss was staggered, meaning the fight didn't drag at any point. As expected, the boss also featured a few mid-fight cutscenes, and from what I could see, the boss's stagger bar didn't actually reset when the boss entered a new phase, which is a welcome addition coming off of Remake and some of its cutscene stagger frustrations. The first demo ended pretty much immediately after the Materia Guardian was defeated, leading us onto the second demo, the Open Wilds of Junon. As the name implies, this second demo was far more open than the first, with a myriad of things to do as we went upon our way to the main quest. It follows Cloud and Co. shortly after leaving the Mithril Mines as they enter the Junon region. The first thing I did, of course, when I had control was open up the map to see how expansive this region really was. Though it seems a little empty for now, the game did make a note to mention that the final release will have even more points of interest to go to and investigate. Fast travel is also thankfully confirmed to be a thing here in Rebirth as well. A few keen-eyed viewers might have spotted a set of orange points of interest. These are known as Fiend sightings and are one of the new pieces of side content introduced in Rebirth. The player is able to stumble upon different unique enemies at each different location where they are tasked with taking down the Fiend. Along the way, the game provides a set of challenges known as combat assignments that the player can complete during the fight for extra rewards. If the player defeats the Fiend before completing all of the challenges, then they do have the option to redo the fight so that they may try again. I didn't opt to redo any of the fights as I honestly had a limited amount of time with this demo and I just wanted to see as much as I could. The second demo does also introduce a new feature called Item Transmutation. During exploration, the player is able to pick up numerous types of raw materials. These materials can then be used to create or transmute different items such as potions, phoenix drafts, or even mysterious cushions. The item description for cushions here implies that the party will be able to come across broken rest stops in the world that can only be unlocked using a cushion, and if hard mode is anything like it was in the original, where benches were a lifeline, then these will definitely prove to be useful. Though I could have walked the length of this entire area, I spent most of my time on the back of a Chocobo. Much like FF16, you can call a Chocobo to your side immediately with the press of the R1 button, allowing you to mount them and just dash across the land. Chocobos also have a bit of a keen nose and are able to smell treasure. If there's anything nearby, a question mark will float ominously above their head, and if you follow the scent to the right area, you'll be literally able to dig around to find it. A quick trip to the nearby Chocobo ranch allowed you to trade golden plumes for new equipment for your Chocobo. Then heading over to the nearby Choco Boutique, you could then equip your Chocobo with all kinds of various pieces of equipment to customize exactly how they look. And yes, you can of course pet the little Chocobo. Though all of Cloud's party is seen traveling together in cutscenes, the game only lets you take 2 members of your party into combat with you. The demo wouldn't let me pick and choose specifically who I could take, instead forcing me to use select presets. However, I do believe the option to pick and choose your party at any given moment will actually be in the final game. A welcome change from Remake, where your party was tied to whatever chapter you were playing at that time. Speaking of party members, now would probably be a good time to talk about Red XIII. After being teased with his eventual appearance at the end of Remake, it's great to see how he finally plays. Red is able to swipe at enemies with standard melee attacks, but actually holding down the attack button will cause him to spin in place and do additional damage. His main combat gimmick is his Vengeance mode, where by guarding against enemy attacks, you're able to fill up his Vengeance bar. By pressing the triangle button, you can enter this Vengeance mode, which buffs both Red XIII's attack damage and the speed of his dodge. It's worth mentioning that you can enter this mode at any given point, the bar doesn't have to be full. After checking out some of the views, digging for treasure, and battling fiends, I eventually headed towards our main destination, under Junon, a small impoverished fishing village which sits just underneath Junon itself. It seems as though Shinra is truly hellbent on oppressing people wherever they go. After arriving, we quickly find trouble brewing. Priscilla, a young resident of Under Junon, rushes us towards the dock as it's supposedly under attack by a monster. Surprisingly, the team encounters Yuffie as she's rescued from the jaws of the monster by none other than Mr. Dolphin. It then falls upon the team to take down the boss. Terror of Deep, as it's known in this game, was called Bottom Swell in the original, I believe, and just like in the original, it can do all kinds of annoying things, like trap members of your party in a floating prison of water. This boss pretty much ended up trolling me right at the very start of the fight. As soon as I ended up rescuing one party member from the water cell prison, he immediately ended up trapping someone else. After entering into a bit of a back and forth, a dalliance of damage so to speak, I ended up biding my time and focusing on ranged attacks, and as soon as I had the boss staggered, I pretty much let loose with everything that I had. Limit breaks, synergy attacks, all kinds of things. I managed to melt its health pretty quickly, and the fight ended with Mr. Dolphin and Cloud teaming up in a cutscene to lay it to rest for good. And that was where the second demo ended. Overall, I really enjoyed my time with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It felt a little bit weird getting back into the remake gameplay groove, especially coming off of Final Fantasy XVI, but once I was able to readjust, everything felt quite smooth as everything just clicked into place. Overall, each demo roughly took me around 25 minutes, culminating in just under an hour playtime total. I wish I'd been able to explore the Junon area a little bit more thoroughly, as I felt like 25 minutes was kind of pushing it, but it has left me excited to see how they tackle the rest of the game, especially considering we now know the game is set to take us all the way up to the Forgotten Capital. It was also great to see Yuffie integrated directly into the main quest of the game. In the original, she was actually just a side character who could have been entirely missed, though I do wonder if she'll still end up stealing our materia somehow. You can expect to see more Rebirth videos in the coming future, so subscribe so you don't miss out. If there are any questions that you want me to answer in a future video that I am able to, let me know down in the comments below. With all that said and done, it has been me, DevilNeverCry. I'd like to thank all of you for watching, and as always, I'll see you next video.